Roll call, please. Kelly Booth. Here. Brian Boyle. Here. Kim Farah. Here. Amy Gentile. Here. Barbara Kishka. Here. Sheila Lose. Here. Sean O'Neill.
Here.
Kristen Savage.
Absent.
Seated at the board table are Dr. Brian Cochran and Mr. Helen, Superintendent and Superintendent of Schools.
Thank you. Good rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Moving on to the approval of the minutes from August 19th.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes from August 19th.
Second. Is there any discussion?
Nice job, Kat.
Thank you. All in favor? Seven. 7-0. Moving on to delegates and individuals.
I'd like to make a motion to limit delegates and individuals to 30 minutes. I'd also like to suggest that although I appreciate the courage it takes to stand at the mic, and I'm a huge advocate for student voice and participation in their own learning, I don't feel that this venue is the appropriate venue for that voice. We're fortunate to have a student delegate and avenues for students to follow so that their voice can be heard, and have grown-ups that represent them, whom we have heard from on several occasions.
A second for discussion.
Sean?
I'd like to actually expand upon that, and since we have two mics now, to give equal time to both sides of the aisle on any given issue, we should have one designated for that particular issue that we're going to be talking about, which I think we're all going to know what the topic is going to be, and then have the other one on over here, because last meeting, the first 10 people were all on the same side of the issue. And that's not fair, it's not part of Robert's rules that promotes fairness at a meeting. 2 to the 10th would be at the 1 in 1,024. That's what it would have been, to have random people come up there and have 10 people on the same side of the aisle. So I would like to suggest to the board that we accommodate both sides so we can ping pong back and forth.
I guess,
I'm unsure how you would know by looking at the delegate sheet who is for and who is against whatever agenda item they may be speaking on. In regards to the last time, I was handed delegate forms by different people, and I put them, first ones were on the top, and as I got them, the rest went underneath. So if you think there's some spurious action that was taken on, you're incorrect. Brian?
Kim, do you know how many you have? Have you received it?
Right now, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've got 5.
Okay,
So I guess there's no reason?
there you go.
Okay. There's a motion and a second on the floor. Did you want to withdraw your motion?
I'll withdraw.
Sean, you want to withdraw your second?
Brian?
Yeah, I'll throw my second, sure.
Okay. Okay, first person is Michael Boucher. Go ahead, sir, you can use that mic, and then the next person is Lauren Kincaid.
Sure. Good evening. My name is Michael. I'm an Atkinson parent. I have 2 children who attend school within the district. I want to thank the board members who carefully considered the expertise of medical professionals and government officials. It is too easy to fall victim to fringe theories and misinformation that circulate the internet, which cause decision makers to make faulty choices. The majority of parents would rather deal with the annoyance of masks than school closings. We need to have a solution before school started, and no plan is perfect. Most people have never experienced a pandemic in their lifetime. If I were to speak without my mask on, I could potentially be exposing everyone to the virus. I don't know if I have the virus. You may all be fine within 3 to 6 feet away from me, but who in this auditorium knows? None of us are viral pathologists, so it is necessary to listen to the experts. We should continue to utilize the guidance that allowed our school district to have a reasonably successful school year like we did for the 2020 and 2020 school year. Students are not dying while wearing a mask in the middle of class. Students may feel discomfort, may feel claustrophobic, and may have the occasional headache. Some students may have asthma or may be obese and have difficulty breathing through a mask. The current plan for the school district to address these issues are by having more breaks without masks. The district should evaluate the effectiveness of those breaks to determine if breaks need to be longer or more frequent. Maybe some students could be excused to take a breather outside when necessary. Before I finish, I have one concern. It does not appear that there is any alternative instruction methods offered, such as hybrid classrooms or remote learning. How will classroom instruction continue if there is a viral outbreak forcing schools to close for a prolonged period of time? Will the schools exhaust all of their blizzard bags and then we'll see how everything goes at the end of the week? Could you please provide parents with a detailed contingency plan? Thank you.
Thank you. Next person is Lauren Kincaid. Are you timing? Sheila? What?
Excuse me, before my time begins, is there a mandate that we are supposed to be masked in this building?
Yes, there is.
Then I would not like my time to start until that issue is dealt with.
The issue is there's a whole group of people without masks on.
Hello. So we had requests from the public to create accommodations due to their disabilities. And so we had to create a section that would accommodate for people with disabilities to attend the meeting unmasked.
So this section up here is all people with disabilities?
That's my,
Is that correct? This section up here?
that would
Camera
be
is
correct.
pointing to the section up here. Thank you.
yes,
I just wanted that noted for the record.
yes.
Everybody should be aware this is a public meeting and you may be on camera even though you're in the audience. Thank you, Ms. Kincaid. Go ahead. Timing.
So, here we are again. And first, I'd just like to start by saying I don't think we should be here at all. I think you should be able to conduct your meeting and the business that you have on your agenda. But since we are here, when we have a child with a nut allergy in the classroom, we protect that child. It's inconvenient, but it is not abusive for my children who do not have allergies. The school clearly communicates which children are at risk from nut allergies, but not those with increased risk factors for severe COVID-19, like asthma, diabetes, congenital heart disease, neurological conditions, or other disabilities that other people can't see. Why are there not protests about nut-free tables and nut-free classrooms, which infringe upon the freedom of others? As of yesterday, there were approximately 462 child deaths from COVID-19 and 4,797,683 cases. Oh, and that's just in the United States. At one point in Illinois, there were 0 kid deaths. And then there was one, and another, until there were 24. Number 24 was Alonzo Moreira, 12 years old. Not to forget, of course, Wyatt Gibson, 5 years old from Georgia, Weekday, 6 years old from Georgia, Porter Helms, 13 years old from Minnesota, Jordan Franklin, 11 years old from Tennessee, Oria Morales, 8 years old from North Carolina. I don't have time in my 3 minutes to list the other 457 children who have died from COVID-19, but I urge you to look up these young warriors. I wonder, though, if we did have a kid that got sick and died of COVID-19 in this district, would it be an isolated case? How many of our kids would need to die or get really sick before we actually decided to work together? Or maybe their deaths would just be a sacrifice for the greater good as it propels us towards the holy grail of herd immunity. Maybe masks and adequate ventilation and pool testing and vaccinations and social distancing and stringent hand washing don't do anything. And I'm willing to be wrong about it all. And I will sincerely apologize if that comes to pass, but right now, that's all we have in our toolbox until we create, discover, or learn more. In the meantime, I want to honor every person, every child who has died from this disease, including Alonzo, Wyatt, Week, Porter, Jordan, and Aria. May their memories be a blessing.
Jen Bisson from Sandown and Atney Davis from Sandown. Atney, could you go to that mic, please?
Hi, my name is Jen from Sandown. I have an 8-year-old in the district. First, I want to thank those of you who voted to support safety in schools last board meeting. I know there have been at least 2 cases of COVID at Sandown North just this week that I'm personally aware of. But I'm hopeful that the safety precautions we're using will be able to keep our schools open despite the COVID exposures. I'm here in an attempt to find common ground with everyone on all sides. Last time, I asked the board to make it a district goal to get more kids out, to get the kids outside, including outdoor classes. I have always been a proponent of having outdoor classes when feasible. My feeling is that this is an area we do have common ground on all sides. I'd like to see more lunches and snacks outdoors for obvious safety reasons as well. The other area I've heard concerns is that not enough kids are getting enough mask breaks. I will fully support anyone's effort to increase mask breaks for their children. Personally, I can say this is not my experience. My 8-year-old gets 2 recesses plus 2 additional mask breaks. I asked her this morning, actually, I said to my daughter, you know, is that good? Do you need more? And she said, no, that's plenty, and the mask really is no big deal, Mom. So I said, okay, you know, you just let me know if you need more breaks, and I'll talk to the school. I'm also here in the hopes that we can take the temperature down, because things have been a fever pitch for too long. I would like to ask that we stop personally targeting and harassing individuals. People are scared. Most are too intimidated to attend a board meeting. I know I almost did not come tonight because of the stress, anxiety, and sleepless nights I've experienced after just a couple of board meetings. I'd like to ask that we stop and remember we are all human beings trying to do what's best for our kids and community. The only agenda I have ever had in this district is being a mom, trying to do what's best for my child. Thank you.
Ms. Davis, go ahead, and then Mr. Kiley.
Thank you. My name is Atney Davis. I live in Sandown, New Hampshire. I'm a mom. I'm a mother of 2 beautiful little boys at Sandown North. I want to thank the board for taking a first mitigation step against the ongoing COVID threat by adopting the New Hampshire mask matrix. This gives us some peace of mind, but the current surge and the pandemic are far from over. One projection finds another 100,000 people could die from the virus by December. This is terrifying for a parent of unvaccinated children when we know the unvaccinated are 29 times more at risk and represent over 95% of the hospitalization and more than 99% of all deaths. We know that successful COVID mitigation requires a multi-layered approach. A recent study predicts nearly 50% of kids in primary schools with universal masking will become infected within 3 months. But that could be reduced to just 22% by combining universal masking with regular COVID testing in school. 22% is too high, but a huge reduction. So why not testing at Timberland? testing need not to be mandatory to be effective and will enable school to detect infection earlier, prevent spread, and keep our schools open. Masking and testing in schools are effective mitigation when combined. But we will never get past this pandemic until our kids and many more in our community are vaccinated. Vaccines for deadly diseases have been required in school for decades. Yet, an unvaccinated teacher can be a major vector of infection in the classroom. Now, with FDA approval for the Pfizer vaccine, employers, nursing homes, healthcare providers, federal government, our military and schools across the country are implementing COVID vaccine mandates. Just as every healthcare worker and caregiver should be vaccinated, so should every teacher and staff member interacting with one of our most vulnerable population, our unvaccinated children.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stop calling out when somebody's speaking, please. Or talking or answering what the person's saying.
Yes, so I've had a request from a board member. Hang on 1 second. I would like to reiterate what I said at the last board meeting to discuss the rules of order at our board meetings. These board meetings are specifically for the board to conduct its business. As a school board, we have duties and responsibility and many items of business that we must address simply for the district to continue to operate. So while our board meetings are open to the public, our board meetings are not public hearings where the public has a right to speak out. In other words, board meetings are not public meetings, but meetings held in public. Second, while the board welcomes participation of interested citizens, all attendees are expected to conduct themselves in a civil and respectful manner, and the board will not tolerate interruptions, harassment, discrimination, threats, or other conduct that interferes with its meetings. There is an appropriate time and a specific manner for citizens to be heard at board meetings. Policy BEDH governs the process for citizens' participation in board meetings. During the delegate and individual session of each board meeting, residents may comment for no more than 3 minutes by completing a comment card and submitting it to the recording secretary at the beginning of the meeting. Consistent with RSA 91A:3 and our board policy BEDB and laws pertaining to student and family privacy rights, the board will not place any matter on the public agenda that's to be properly discussed in a non-public session. Complaints regarding individual employees, personnel, or students should be directed to the superintendent in accordance with policies KE and KEB. Further, policy states that all speakers are to conduct themselves in a civil manner. Obscene, libelous, defamatory, or violent statements will be considered out of order and will not be tolerated. The board chair may terminate the speaker's privilege of address if the speaker does not follow this rule of order. Persons appearing before the board are reminded that members of the board are without authority to act independently as individuals in official manners. Thus, questions may be directed to individual board members, but answers must be deferred pending consideration by the full board. Therefore, board members will take comments and presentations from the public under advisement only. Third, because some members of the public in attendance at our meetings have not followed the rules of order, I would like to put everyone on notice again that the board intends to strictly comply with policy BEDH and requires that all citizens do the same while attending board meetings. Interruptions, name-calling, booing and speaking, and making intimidating and bigoted remarks during the meeting will result in removal from the meeting. Violations of policy BEDH shall also result in immediate removal from the meeting. Thus, please only speak during your allotted time, limit your time to 3 minutes, refrain from speaking about employees or students, and please conduct yourself in a civil manner. Failure to abide by these rules of order will at a minimum result in your loss of speaking privileges. If after losing those privileges or receiving a warning, your conduct continues to interfere with the meeting or otherwise violates the rules of order, law enforcement will be asked to physically remove you from the meeting. As you may be aware, once detained by law enforcement, you may be subject to criminal charges. Thank you. Mr. Kiley, if you could go ahead. This is the far mic in the back, sir. Go ahead.
Testing. Thank you. Dave Kiley, Atkinson, New Hampshire. I don't think I'm going to go on tonight. I think I've given the board quite a bit. Not from CNN, but from or New York Times, but the very lettered organizations that you guys hide behind. I could not have contemplated the significance of the decision that you had before you a year ago, but the information available to you is now very different. A few of you understood this matrix was wrong on rights of principle and its impracticality. And I agree, and I appreciate that, I really do. But did any one of you ask the most important questions? Do we have a problem? Are we creating a policy that reduces risk in the student population? What does the data tell us? It's not 30 that were hospitalized since 2020. It's down to 27. It went down. I don't know how that goes down. It's a cumulative number. Do these critical rates, hospitalizations and deaths under 18, reflect the rest of the community? How did millions of other students do in non-masking environments? Did any of you ask? No, instead, I heard a lot of implementation questions. It made me think of how to sell snowballs to Eskimos when it's too cold out. A solution looking for a problem. Wrong or right, this matrix provides a shield to hide behind, just like the MOU did. The so-called experts with their research-based data and your insurance company and attorneys support it per the FAQ. Dr. Cochran, was that misinformation? What did you tell me when I had a 91A request? No documents, right? But information from Zoom calls. Would you put that language in your FAQ, Dr. Cochran? We have data on children masked and unmasked. It's not because you did a great job last year. It's because they're kids and they don't transmit the way adults do. We know the hospitalization mortality rates are statistically zero for the children here and throughout the world. For adults, those rates are down 80%. Yet, we are here, thinking we are doing this great thing to save humanity. I have news for you. The Weavers may have convinced you. But we all know that the Emperor is not wearing any clothes. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to the next item of the agenda, our student rep is here. Where is she? Oh, hi, go ahead.
Okay. On a more positive note, school is back in session and administrators as well as faculty members are very happy to report that the first week has gone extremely well. As school has only been in session for just a few days, now there's quite obviously not a ton of new updates. However, the following information has been given for this meeting. TLC at Sandown Central has welcomed 140 preschool through kindergarten students to the 2021 to 2022 school year. Students in preschool and pre-K programs attend school Tuesday through Friday, and TLC is pleased to offer the Peer Partner Program once again with 12 participants. Students in the 3 full-day kindergarten and the 2 half-day sessions are practicing their routines and enjoying to get to know their classmates. This year, TLC welcomes specialists from Danville Elementary School as well as members of their community. The PTA helped welcome families to the open house on August 25th, in which they conducted a membership drive and provided details to the family about their first fundraiser of the school year. More information will be made available about this fundraiser soon. Sandown Central is looking forward to an exciting year and learning for all of its students. Up at the high school, staff and administration have been beyond welcoming to students beginning the school year. The high school has had a very successful opening so far, and faculty members are looking forward to a very great school year. Incoming freshmen attended orientation last Wednesday, in which they were able to meet all of their teachers for the school year and walk through their schedule. After orientation classes, students were welcomed to an activity fair where they were able to sign up for organizations and talk to student leaders. Freshmen were welcomed to organizations such as Project Hope, the Math Team, Best Buddies, Sustainability Club, and the Gay Straight Alliance. Following this, the freshmen were given ice cream courtesy of the Student Council. On a similar note, the TRHS administration is happy to announce that the high school currently has 37 clubs and organizations up and running, and new ones in the works. The high school is looking forward to lots of opportunities for student involvement this year, and students are heavily encouraged to take these opportunities. Fall sports have additionally begun at the high school and middle school levels. Teams are practicing and playing games against other schools at this time. Thus far, all of the sports teams have remained up and running thanks to our athletes and coaches following COVID-19 safety protocols for athletics. I would like to make the school board aware of a petition currently making its way around high school and middle school in regard to the current dress code. Personally, I believe there is a large number of issues with this aforementioned petition. The petition was created on change.org by a few students and it has now been signed by about 400. Despite this, there's no way to confirm that all of these students are in fact Timberland students, nor is there any way to confirm that each of these students only signed once. Similarly, the petition description lacks a bit of information on what students would exactly like to be changed about the dress code. Personally, I don't believe that this is an issue that needs to be addressed urgently. However, I wanted to make the school board and district administration aware of this and the possible call for some reformation to the dress code on the horizon. Should this issue persist, I will take it upon myself to report to the school board and/or policy committee that handles the dress code the specific wants of confirmed Timberland High School students. But once again, I don't see this issue going much further than possibly a few protesting students and a petition that goes around for a couple more days. And lastly, I would like to thank everyone for their attention to this week's report, and I appreciate the time given to discuss student events. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is the school reopening update. This is just informational. There's a sheet that was posted on the district website with frequently asked questions. Are there any questions? Barbara?
2 questions. The first one is several people have asked me about removing masks when there's indoors when we have 6 feet of distance. Would you, Dr. Cochran, would you please speak to the circumstances under which this might be implemented?
Yeah, just give me 1 second. We've had significant internal discussions about that, and there are varying opinions. Some are in favor, some are not. I've had meetings with multiple principals and administrators in the last couple of days. One of their concerns is consistency and predictability, given the situation. I think Mr. Vacareza, did you want to address this similar to our conversation earlier? If you could. I know you've also spoken with several other administrators as well.
So for those that don't know him, Mr. Vacareza is our new high school principal. Go.
So, as this topic comes about, one of the keys that we want to do is always have a practice of policy that is enforceable, that has consistency. As we met with people, interviewed people, talked with people in the district, with their families, with their school board members, superintendents, staff members, the key
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it did. I have one more.
Go ahead.
If I might. This came up during the delegates and individuals. What are the circumstances under which a class may go full remote or hybrid? And are there any plans to support hybrid teaching this year?
I'm sorry, I'm not.
Okay, so the question came up at what point do we go remote? Is it class by class? Is it the school and would we ever be going to hybrid this year?
Right now, this matrix basically is structured to try and maintain COVID levels and COVID transmissions such that we would never be forced to go out of an all-in-school model. Parent after parent, regardless of where they stood on the mask issue or other risk mitigation issues, have been very clear that there are many, many students for whom remote learning does not work, and almost unanimously they are supportive of doing what it takes to make sure that the students are in the building, being educated in the same room with their teacher, rather than being at home, supervised or unsupervised. So I think that's the one thing that seems to be most common in everybody's desire, to not to have to go to some other model. And while we can have disagreements about how we achieve that, I think district administration, building administration have been very clear that their goal is to try to keep students in school with their teachers. And I've been in, it's only been a few days now, but in almost every building in the district, walking through classrooms and seeing the level of enjoyment and how engaged kids are. Teachers are thrilled to be back, being face-to-face every day. And that's the thing, from my perspective, that we need to protect most of all. And while we can disagree about how we're going to do it, I think that is the predominant goal that we should all be striving towards.
Go ahead, Brian, and then Kelly, and then I'll, go ahead, Brian.
Do we even have the staff to even go remote learning? I don't even think you have enough staff to do that, do you?
I'm sorry?
You don't even have enough staff if you wanted to offer remote learning. Is that correct?
Well, I think the question is, what would trigger the district or the school to go remote? We are not offering a remote option, but
I understand.
there are districts that have closed down, not in this part of the country, but that have already closed down to go remote. So the question is, what triggers that?
You don't have the staff.
Well, no, you're saying you don't have the staff, but say there's, because I'm from Danville, I'll just use Danville as an example. Say there's a major outbreak of COVID in Danville, and they have to shut down Danville Elementary. At what point would you say that, last year we had a trigger to go remote, hybrid, in person. There's no hybrid, there's not going to be hybrid this year. Is there a trigger point at which, say, 30% of the kids in the school get it, that the school has to go remote? That's not a staffing issue, because at that point, everybody would be remote. Do we have that? Do we have that matrix? I don't know. And if we don't...
We don't. We discussed it in general, that there may be a need, and the discussions were very similar to your comments that if we had to move, hybrid is probably not doable, either in the short term or the longer term. And so we would have to essentially, do a quick pivot to a blizzard bag, fully remote piece, and then monitor and try to get people back in. It would cause some disruption. It would probably cause loss of 1 or more days, because you have to have all the technology be sent home to students. You have to make sure our teachers are now switching to technology. We have discussed it in general, but we've been more focused on the first 2-3 weeks of school and trying to make sure it's successful, but it is on our radar.
Okay. Kelly, then Sean.
I have a different question. So there's
I was going to be bringing this up later, is about blizzard bags. I mean, I think our experience with remote is a far superior implementation than the way that we were doing blizzard bags. So I was always hoping that we would basically never see blizzard bags again, that if we were going to be having a snow day, we should be able to dynamically, tomorrow is, for whatever reason, we have to go remote, and with synchronous lessons plans, you should be able to not miss a beat, and all of a sudden, all the students are logged in, and the teacher can.
You can't do that, though, because as Dr. Cochran just explained, the technology doesn't go home with the students on a daily basis. Those Chromebooks are in the schools, are they not? In the elementary, or are they at home? So all those students have their Chromebooks with them all the time at home? That would allow you to do
The
that?
elementary students do not all.
They
have
do
them
not.
at
So
home.
that's the problem. You couldn't switch to, you can't do it.
However,
if the
we are
students-
looking at that, looking at purchasing, bags or sleeves that would better protect those Chromebooks and giving consideration to being able to have those Chromebooks go home with some of the younger students.
In order to have the Chromebooks ready and to be charged to be used every school day, they're hooked in a basically big plastic box, and it's they're each plugged in. In order to disassemble that to send it home, normally takes, I don't know if Mr. Henderson is available, but in my experience, it takes somewhere in the range of 2 to 3 days to take it all apart, bag everything up, and send it home. And so if we have the capacity to not do that, but that would mean basically doubling, at least in the elementary level, the number of Chromebooks that we have. But it is something that we have discussed and looked at the options in terms of whether or not we could do it.
So you would need a snowstorm, a 48-hour advance snow day, so that they could unplug all these Chromebooks and send them home to kids.
Well, they could also access on their own devices from home.
Right. If they have them.
But not every student has a device.
Right.
Correct.
So just one comment, weren't we doing this when we had cohorts? I mean, how were cohorts working last year? Everybody was taking home their devices, right?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, my understanding was that last year they took them when they were in the hybrid model or the cohort model, but that's not what's happening this year.
But it's something we've done before, right?
We have, when you say that's something, which
We had the kids taking their Chromebooks home every night when we were in cohorts.
Yep.
So why can't we do that now?
I think the only reason that or one of the reasons we might have is that we're asking students to take Chromebooks home, back and forth every day. Will all students remember, especially the elementary, to bring them back every day? Will we have more damage? Will we have more replacement? That sort of thing. Is it something that if we could do? I think it's easier if we were forced to go to a fully remote model and kids were to have it and everything went smoothly, we could do it. But doing it on a first time through, you'd probably have some significant glitches at the elementary level, especially lower elementary.
Well, I think to Sean's point, we might be forced to go remote tomorrow for whatever. I mean, it's unlikely, but so if we sort of get them in the mindset now, then there'll be much less disruption if we do need to go fully remote for whatever reason.
To expand upon that, it isn't like these numbers are going to just all of a sudden just creep up on us. I mean, we're going to have, if we're looking at
I agree.
implementation, so I don't think that argument that you're trying to present for us, because we will have advance notice that we are approaching that. We can start to beat the drum and say, kids, make sure you take these home each night, and be prepared that potentially something could happen.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you at all, and I don't think administration would either. We've had enough on the go that we really haven't pushed our vision out that far, because we're still problem solving on a daily
Just so that
basis.
people, as well, I mean, myself and the board, if we were to close down for 2 to 3 weeks due to this, we have to make that up.
Yep.
So that's just tacking down on the end of June.
Yeah,
And we have to be done legally by the end of June. So depending on how long this is, we might be having a weekend school. To make that
Take
up.
it off vacation.
Or vacation. location or some other permutation of that?
We have to mobilize to getting devices in every student's hand and getting those home in a timely way that we can pivot to that remote instruction.
We spent, early summer, we spent a lot of time on that, Mr. Henderson and his budgeting. I think in terms of procurement, we're way ahead of where we were last year. Last year, we were actually waiting for devices that were coming, across the Pacific and then across the entire country. And I think that we are in a significantly better shape in that regard, partially because of what we did last year, partially from the steps that we've already started taking for this year. But yes, that is something that we're actually planning for. We have to be ready enough that we're not going to lose significant time in transitioning from one mode to the other. But if we have to, we do, but it's going to take a little bit more conversation and planning. If we're expecting all of our teachers to be able to move to remote, then we have to, right now we focus on the first few days, but now we have to work on where we are, how we're going to plan for this, what would it look for, what would it look like. But your point's well taken, and I believe the administration is agreement. We're hoping to avoid going to fully remote, but if we have to, we could do it. And my guess is if we had to make the transition, it would be no more than a 3-day switch. And that would also mean that if we had to go back again, it should be even quicker than that. So I wouldn't anticipate that one situation like that would trigger a significant extension of the year. But at the same point in time, we should be, this is still in the first week of school, once we're into this a couple more weeks, then we should be starting to plan for all of the other contingencies. I agree with you 100% on that.
That's actually an easier transition than transitioning to hybrid. Hybrid would take a lot longer to coordinate the scheduling and creating cohorts. The discussions that we've had, we expect that would take somewhere between 4 weeks at best, but probably more likely 6 weeks. But we can work on a plan for looking at what it would look like if we needed to pivot to remote.
That should be a matter of days, the very first time, and hopefully faster than that if we ever had to do it again.
Has there been any discussion with TTA about an MOA? Should we have to change working conditions?
There has been some conversation and some topics have been discussed. Yes, but not a broad range of topics yet.
Kelly?
My question is about the exemption policy for the district. Mr. Kellen, last meeting, I believe you mentioned that there would be an exemption policy for students, and I presume staff and faculty in the community. And I'm just wondering, I'm guessing that's based on ADA compliance. So I was wondering if folks were aware that the Department of Justice and the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission have said that the ADA does not cover a blanket, you don't need to wear a mask if you need an exemption, and if we've had legal look at whatever policy we have for the district?
Yes, it's really, as you know, not a policy actually, and it's not really an exemption, it's an accommodation. And accommodations are based on an individual's need due to their disability. So there are 2 avenues that could be achieved. If a person, student, adult, whoever has a disability, we give consideration, well, for students, I'll speak specifically to students because it does take a different form for staff. But for students, if a student has a disability and they are not identified for special education, that's brought forward through Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. And the 504 team gives consideration through the referral, disposition of that referral, determining eligibility of having the disability and needing an accommodation plan or a 504 plan. And then we consider reasonable accommodations other than mask wearing if the wearing of a mask is unsafe or they are unable to do it for whatever reasons related to their disability. If a student is identified for special education, those same considerations are made for accommodations through the IEP process. So if you consider the Venn diagram, it's really about rights. And 504 is the big circle, and IDEA is the small circle within. And so students who are identified for special education are protected under Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, as well as the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. But students who are identified for having a 504 accommodation plan are not protected by the rights associated directly with the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. However, in the absence of regulation of Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, the Office for Civil Rights has directed that school districts follow the regulations assigned to the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, so the process is somewhat similar. However, there are different sets of questions for Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. So, to simplify that, if a student has a disability and that disability is such that wearing a cloth face covering or a mask is unsafe for them, you have to give consideration to alternative methods of PPE and other accommodations that would allow the student access to the general education setting and participation in a free, appropriate public education. That can take a variety of forms. You would consider things like clear face shields. The distancing is something that has to be considered as a reasonable accommodation. So that is something that we do give consideration to as a team. However, it's very difficult to achieve in all environments within the school setting. So if it can be achieved in a particular setting, that might be employed. But the team gives consideration to all alternative methods of PPE, mostly that clear face shield, while not as effective as a cloth face covering, according to what we have been told. It still offers some protection to that student and other students. So,
examples of accommodations provided. Can you speak to community members in district buildings that would not fall under the IDEA, and 504?
I'm sorry, could you ask that again?
Can you speak to community members that wouldn't fall under those, which I would assume would fall under the ADA for community members, non-students and non-staff in district buildings? What are your determinations for whether they can be exempt from our policies?
It's the same thing. You have to give consideration to the disability. If there is information that specifies a disability, you determine the eligibility for accommodations, and you make reasonable accommodations to allow them to perform whatever function they do within our school setting. So if it's an employee, those same accommodations need to be considered and provided.
And if it's a community member that is not, so for instance, in this space right now,
yes.
Are you saying that if a community member wanted to come in here and request an accommodation, they would meet with somebody first?
No. So for public meetings, there isn't a system in place where we would actually meet with those folks. They just declare that they have a disability. We do not ask them to show proof of the disability. We just create accommodations for their participation or attendance at a meeting or an event.
Would viewing a public live stream of this event not in this space not be a reasonable accommodation?
It can be. It's preferred that if you can accommodate safely, or I guess safely is the key here, right? But if you can accommodate safely within that same setting, that's the most reasonable accommodation.
Okay, thank you.
This is in essence a specific application of a process that we use in schools and have for decades.
Yes, since 1973.
Oh, no, I'm familiar. I just wanted clarification. Thank you.
Expand on what Kelly was just talking about, I think it would be hard for us to agree at a delegate session on a live stream, so I think that's going to put that issue, unless we're going to have accommodations for that as well to speak. My other question is that who's doing the assessment on this? This is our staff that's doing the assessment?
Assessment of what, I'm sorry?
Somebody has a disability, they bring a doctor's note to present for the exemption.
So if the student is identified as in need of special education and they have an IEP, it goes to the IEP team. If the student is not identified, it goes to the 504 team.
Okay. And then, so if a doctor has stated that they should have accommodations for their disabled in this case, and we should not be forced to wear a mask, is our staff overriding that decision?
Well, you give the, I plan to share online anyway, the forms used for 504, which as well, that will walk you right through those questions, and I can share that with you tomorrow easily.
Well, I'd like you to walk us through the process that it would be in there. Meaning, would you guys ask, you got a note from a doctor as a basically prescribing that they should be exempt from this.
There are a number of questions.
Questions that
well,
you ask.
part of the issue becomes a note from a doctor may or may not give sufficient evidence under the law for us to be able to give an accommodation. So if it's someone who has significant experience and is able to provide us first time out the information that we need, it would typically proceed fairly quickly. But if what they present is a conclusion, this child needs this accommodation, and there's no documented medical evidence for it, it lengthens the process, because what we now have to do is reach back out to the doctor and ask them for more specifics so that we can show that in fact there is a need that needs to be met under the.
So part of the condition that when you present a doctor's note to give us accommodations, you're also has to agree to release your rights to your doctor so that somebody here on staff can communicate with the doctor?
You don't have to. So, for example.
Well, if you don't do that, then you're basically going to be denied.
No, not true. So we have our nurses on staff who, let's say, for example, one of the most common ones is asthma, right, with respect to wearing a mask. So if we have significant medical history already, that the child has asthma, has a history of asthma attacks, hospitalizations, medication, we get a note from their physician. We probably get a similar note from the physician annually stating that they have asthma and their doctor's orders with respect to the prescription that they have for inhalers or whatever other medications that they might need while at school. We have that information already, and we may.
You're assuming that you have that information, and I can understand that point that you can make your decisions based on the information you have because you have the history of it. But it's not necessarily, there's no reason that a child or the family needs to disclose to this district what the child has an asthma or not. So
in order to.
So the path that we would go down would be different for somebody that you have knowledge of. And it would be different upon, if you want to talk to the doctor or not.
Well, Dana, did you want to jump in here?
Dana can speak better to the staff, but we can get back to your question about students.
Can you bring
Bend it down a little?
Yes.
So back to your question about the students.
No, doesn't.
What's that?
Well, there's a, I think,
I said back to the,
Oh,
no. Do you want more information about the student question that you asked?
yeah.
Okay, sure. So, if I'm understanding correctly, are you asking, do we have the right to acquire additional information with respect to the determination of whether or not the child has a disability? If that's your question, the answer is yes. We do have that right. And if we feel as though we need to do further evaluation, we need consent from the parent, but that is one of our obligations as well. So if we feel like we need additional information, we might say, we want to conduct further evaluation to determine whether or not a condition exists. And that is within our right and within the scope of the law.
So, a guardian slash parent would have to give up their rights to ensure that their child is properly vetted by our administration to get.
It's not just the administration, it's a multidisciplinary team. So
Well, the school,
it is the law, and there are several questions. Here's one of the most significant questions. Sorry, I moved away from mine. If I can make it big enough to read. Does the student have a physical or mental impairment? This is really what ADA and other laws reference with respect to a disability. A physical or mental impairment means A, any psychological disorder or condition, cosmetic disfigurement, or anatomical loss affecting one or more of the following body systems: neurological, musculoskeletal, special sense organs, respiratory, including speech organs, cardiovascular, reproductive, digestive, genitourinary, hemic and lymphatic, skin and endocrine, and or any mental or psychological disorder such as mental retardation, organic brain syndrome, emotional or mental illness, and specific learning disabilities. So, that's what constitutes a disability, and I just want to say the term mental retardation is no longer used, it's intellectual disabilities. And then you go on and you determine whether or not there's a condition, right, by that standard. And if there's a condition, then you can tell me to stop at any time if I'm boring you.
Well, I don't know, I'm looking at the conditions and all this stuff, and it's basically you're having somebody in our school district evaluating that versus the professionals, which would be the ones.
We do that all the time. That's what we do for students, for special education or 504. School districts have been doing that for decades.
That's literally the law.
That is the law.
But what we look for is medical documentation.
But it has been provided, it's just that it's being
Well,
scrutinized.
no, it's not scrutiny. You get the medical documentation, you get the condition, and then you have to ask the question, does the identified impairment substantially limit a major life activity? And there's a whole list of what major life activities are.
so, Chris, there's just a series of documented form questions that you ask, correct? And those are available, right?
Yes.
You can send them to Sean?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yep. And I'm happy to sit down and meet with you and go over it if you'd like.
Sheila?
Just ask one more question on school opening and stuff like that. Actually, it's for Lucy. Poor Lucy. I know. You got it. I have a question that came up earlier this week. Elementary students, TLC, etc. I had somebody saying that their child did not come home with the same mask that they left with. Are the teachers giving out masks to these kids if they get soiled or wet, or are replacements given to them?
Yes, and especially at TLC, some of the younger students like to suck on their masks, and once they become dirty, we do replace them. For the 4s and 5s, there are masks that are white there are different masks for the littlest children because those white ones are a little bit too big.
Okay, now what about the elementary, like Sandown North, Danville? If the teacher is finding them,
We have many masks on hand at each of the school buildings, and we will offer replacements.
okay, so the parents shouldn't be worried that it's somebody else's, or it's more than likely given to them by a teacher. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, any other questions? If not, we'll move on to the athletic update. There's several items in your packet. I think these were in the last meeting packet also. Are there any questions on this? If not, we'll move on to the facilities update.
Can I just ask one quick question on athletics? Sorry. Brian, we had talked a few meetings ago and meetings before that about talking turf committees and things like that, just putting something together to start looking at the future. Have you mentioned that to Angelo, or?
Could you run that by again?
Setting up a turf committee?
Oh.
Someone to look into the fields, and we talked about this several times. Is this something you were going to talk to Angelo about it, so if we could?
Yes, he and I have had conversations. I've also had conversations with Mr. Fournier about it, and with with Carl as well. We've had preliminary conversations. He has some experience in this, and my expectation is that it would either go to SIP or one of the other facilities, one of the other committees rather. In terms of the process, we do know that we submitted for a grant, which if we're successful, and so far we've been moving along to pretty much a finalist, we could receive significant funding that would provide 50% of the cost.
No, that's for the refurbishment of the track. That was specifically for the track.
Yes, that was track.
So Kristen's asking about looking at a potentially turf field. That really needs to be part of, one, the capital improvement plan, which there's a committee meeting next Thursday. Next Thursday, you're certainly welcome to attend. And it also speaks to implementation of the 5-year strategic plan that really should start being revised fairly soon, because we're in year either 3 or 4. So that is the time at which you start to do it again.
So
it also speaks to this performance contract RFP, because that could tie into that. That RFP is out and is due back September 1st, is it not? Or walk through September 1st and then September 25th. So to your question, I think it ties into a whole big refurb, and we'll put it over to Carl.
So can I just, I'm going to jump in real quick, Carl, because part of what we discussed, I mean, this has been on the table for about 3 years now, and it just hasn't happened, but, and I agree with Kim, it needs to go through those committees, but part of the idea with the committee was to look into the situation and see the benefits of having it versus the costs and all that too, which I think is a little bit preliminary before you can get to those stages of putting it on a CIP and whatnot, because what are the costs, what are the benefits, but it's all kind of, it's an all-encompassing thing, but I think it's important to get a committee together to start looking at, you know, I mean, like, what are other schools doing? How are they finding funding? What else is out there? So that when it is presented to CIP and things of that nature, there can be some creative discussion as to, you know, is it feasible and how would you make it work, as opposed to not having that background information, so.
The problem is you can't look at that turf field in isolation. If you're going to start doing work on the fields, it needs to be looked at in its
100%. 100%. It all should have been looked at before we even talked about doing anything with the track, because that could have all been figured out together. But that's why the unfortunate part is we didn't start this committee 3 years ago, because when this came up with this grant, we may have been in a different position with different information. So I just don't want to keep putting this off just to start getting the preliminary information of what are the cost-benefit analysis of having it. And we might find out it's not even worth having. But if it is worth, then we need to move forward talking about it.
So who's the CIP rep for Plastow? It's Barbara.
It's next Wednesday.
Next Wednesday, so.
I have been actually part of the cost-benefit analysis in Litchfield when we were looking at this. Similarly, they were in a process where they were going to have significant repairs to the track, and they were trying to balance, you know, repairing the track or trying to put both pieces together. And we work with two different companies to do that analysis. Essentially, it looks at, what are the costs to maintain the existing field over the period of time? What's the expected life of the turf that you're going to put in? Are there revenue opportunities that you would have that would help mitigate the costs and that sort of thing? What would the number of years be in order to recoup and pay? And would that give you enough time to start to put money back in place for when it needed to be replaced? So I'm assuming that's the sort of analysis you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what we've been talking about for years. We're trying to put a committee together to start looking into,
Okay.
to figure out what what makes sense. And granted, it all ties in together, all these little pieces, but none of it, we don't have any of that background information, which, like I said, is a shame, because if we had had all that in place, and then this grant just came out, we may have been in a much different position. So I just don't want to keep putting it off and then miss an opportunity down the road. So I just would like to see that move forward.
I'll see if we can work with Angelo and Carl to try and see what a committee structure would look like and have that ready for the next school board meeting. Would that be all right?
Go ahead, Carl.
Good evening. Is there any questions that I can answer for you?
Okay, so you presented us a facilities update, which is excellent. We're getting a lot of facilities done here. I have one question. We have been doing preventative maintenance on HVAC units for months now. I mean, I know there should be a PM schedule. That should be ongoing. So I guess the question is, you're saying PM is continuing. PM should always be going on. There should be a scheduled maintenance. So is train still continuing to have to do repairs? How close to completion are we?
They're on the
been
last
here for
building.
months.
Ma'am, they're on the last building there. They've been here over the last 2 weeks. As you were aware, we upgraded their purchase orders to allow them to continue once I got here. And then they had to schedule them in here, so they didn't get in here for an extra couple of weeks. So that's what the holdup was on that. But they have been here since probably last Monday they started coming back. And they'll be finishing up, I would have to say, within the next 2 weeks. They've done all the cleaning, they've done all the belts, filters on the high school. Now they're going through, checking all the valves, making sure they're operating the way they're supposed to be, making sure the coolant levels are right inside the AC, that type of stuff. And they did find a couple ventilation fans that had bad motors. They've ordered more motors put on them. It's just continuing maintenance of the repairs that they found needed to be done during their initial inspection.
Okay. Are we measuring air exchanges, and or do we have capability to go back and now remeasure to see where we're at with all these?
We would have to go out to bid again and get a company to come in and pay the $80,000 that we paid originally to have somebody come
We
do that.
don't have any in-house capability to measure airflow?
We have a machine to do it. We have somebody that knows how to do it. However, without the certification to do it, you have to have a license, you have to be certified to take air balancing and air exchange measurements, and we don't have that capability in-house. You have to have a certification, and even if I sent the person out for training, they would have to work for an air balancing certified person for 5 years before they become certified. So you can't just take a piece of equipment and do it.
So, go ahead, 1 second though. So I understand that they may not be certified, but wouldn't they be able to get at least some relatively accurate measure? Or you would not?
It could be an accurate measure,
Okay.
but if I came back here and said,
this is what we're
looking at,
Okay.
somebody's going to say, how do you know for sure? And
So is that something we need to look at? Go ahead, John.
I was going to expand upon that. I mean, this is not, we're taking a sample and certifying it that it's this and sending it off to some agency that needs to be a certified number. This is for our own information. And if we don't have anything, that's a data point that we can't make anything. But if you do this and we find out that someone's practically lower, we might want to bring in a professional to expand upon that. But if the data point shows that it's the other way, and to cooperate what we've been doing. If we're not seeing more exchange rates, we should know why. And, I mean, data's...
Well, what would you do with that information, sir?
Pardon?
What would you do with that information?
Yeah.
But what we're gonna do is if we found out that something wasn't given a good air exchange rate, we would change the equipment, correct? We're planning on doing that already. I have a plan to address all the HVAC inadequacies in this district.
No,
It's gonna take me a little time to do that.
And I do
But if I take these readings now, it's gonna tell me, all right, we need to change these pieces of equipment. So do we wanna spend the $80,000 to have a company come in and do this? Am I correct in saying that's what we paid? $80,000 to have somebody come in and take
We've already
these
done an
readings again?
assessment, so that's the baseline. This is what we wore years ago, now, or not years ago, but...
Last year.
Yeah, and we've been doing improvements, but then we do them improvements and we have no assessment on what did it improve to.
Okay. So is it the will of the board that I go out and go out to bid for another air assessment, or do you want us to?
I would not suggest it.
But when we were going through this process last year, we actually, and correct me if I'm wrong about the fair, but I think you brought it up, that we should have our technicians follow the trained ones so that they could be doing this stuff. It was actually brought up, that specific topic was to have our staff trained so that we could do these kind of airflow assessments. Not in a certified aspect, but a way to turn around and grab these data measurements.
Validate that the tool that we were using was close, within a reasonable margin of error, so that they were taking measurements for some of those.
Yeah, well, I know you're new, so you're kind of missing some of the, perhaps you and Mark need to get together and have a conversation about what was done, because I don't think, you're probably not even aware, because you weren't here. But we did try to, we had a train come in with certified equipment, and we asked our technicians to back it up to see if they were comparable measurements. And I think, generally speaking, I don't have the data in front of me, that it was not, they weren't spot on, but they were close enough that they were relatively useful. At this point, we have identified, or training has identified, which pieces of equipment are most in need of being replaced. We are meeting in the CIP, and Carl has gone through, and Brian and Carl and I met earlier just to try to bring him up to speed on the whole CIP process. He is revamping the CIP based on training recommendations for replacement of air handling units, because if we ever get the ESSER funds released, we should be able to make quite a bit of a dent in that. And we're also looking at going out for this performance contract, which will allow us to have another companies come in and reassess again, but I think we've got a good handle on where we're at. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have our technician go back and just at least watch it. I agree, we spent all this money, we've done a lot of PM, let's see if we're doing any better.
And that should be probably part of our normal PM process is a yearly assessment of airflow. I mean, what are we going to, assume, the world's all great again and we're back to normal. I mean, are we going to go back to, what it was? I'm not saying because you weren't here, Carl, which I hope that you're going to correct, but, we found out that there was basically a big gaping hole for PMs relative to HVACs.
Well, we're also looking at upgrading the BMS, correct? So that would also be something, then you wouldn't have to go in and check, because your BMS would be sending you information.
No, that's good. With an uptime, a more current model, yes, you'd be able to get that kind of information.
For instance, this system in here actually measures the CFM into each of the rooms that it's supplying, so it can actually see that ramp up a speed or however it works in the computer world. But they can actually measure what's going into each of the areas of this room, and actually there's several in this room itself, and I can see that. However, we have antiquated systems in our buildings for the majority of the fact. I can't see it. My computer's too new to be able to retrograde into seeing those systems, so this is going to be part of that upgrade that we're going to be doing.
I was able to share with Carl when we got the training report back with all of the issues. I would work with Mark to develop sort of a color coded here the issues unit by unit, and shared with him, you know, the overview of that piece, and he was able to take a look at that. And so he was aware of the training stuff. I think it's somewhat helpful. The question becomes, how much money do we spend to confirm that the changes that we've made are working? We know that from the training meeting, Kim, that you and I were at in a Zoom meeting last year, we know that the industry standard 20 years ago was 1 error exchange an hour. And 10 years ago it was 2 exchanges an hour. The notion of 3 error exchanges an hour was actually only something new as a result of COVID. And so that's part of the calculation here. Where are we now? Where do we need to be? And how do we do it in a cost-efficient manner, recognizing that HVAC is a system. You can push more air through a pipe, but at the same point in time, if it's a small pipe, then you're not replacing the pipe. So I think it's a bigger, based on Carl's conversation with me, a bigger project, and we need to plan a little bit more further ahead in terms of what's the limiting factor in each of those cases. Because you can spend a lot of money fixing one piece, but the limiting factor is actually somewhere else. So that's I think, where we are in terms of the testing piece. Do we need to test everywhere? Can we do some sample testing? You know, typically from a science perspective, if sample testing is pretty consistent, then you can have a little bit more faith in it. But if it's up and down, then you really have to go away from a sample and start to look more at each individual case. So that's kind of where we are so far. Carl and Maria actually have worked together to try and as Dr. Ferris pointed out, utilize as much of that grant funding towards this as possible. And so I have to congratulate both of them because they actually pulled in folks from the DOE who specialize in this area and locked them in a room for 3 hours and picked their brain, which will both speed us up and save us money. So kudos to them for that.
Barbara? I did have one additional question. We've been focusing on air exchanges, but a long-term problem has been temperature and having the temperature stay where you set it. With these new systems, are they going to be measuring temperature and hopefully helping us with that issue?
Of course.
That's what I want to hear.
I'm a big proponent of making people comfortable, but consistency is a big thing when that comes to that. So I don't want to be called 48 times a day to change the temperatures in different rooms. So there will be definitely better managed and better operated systems.
Very good, thank you.
Okay, Kelly? Did the water filtration thing for the high school that was scheduled to start or be done
It was
yet?
supposed to be installed on Wednesday. They called and said that the parts weren't all in. We're still waiting for that.
Thank you.
I reached out to him right before this meeting to try to get an answer, and he didn't respond.
Thanks. Sean?
I was just wondering if we have explored any kind of, like an ozone generator or a UV solution in an HVAC that would actually kill.
So in my last district, I bought a bunch of UV lights for custodians to go in the rooms and use and radiate the room after the school was out, and they could get about 15 rooms a night, so every third day those classes would get hit. They did not do that here. I've asked for during the walkthrough yesterday, I mentioned that we would be interested in any type of disinfectant that could be added to either the rooms themselves with UVGI up in the upper atmosphere areas or actually in the ductwork. The problem with that is it's a very expensive proposition, probably about $2,000 to $10,000 per unit, depending on the size of the unit, because UV light is only good if the air that's passing across it's in front of it for a long enough time to kill anything that's in it. So, number one, you have to have a bigger unit for a unit that's blowing more air. We're blowing more air, so we're going to have larger units. Number two, you have to change the bulbs every single year, and that's a very expensive proposition as well. Ozone's not recommended in classrooms. Ozone's bad for asthmatics and breathing issues. And the other thing that I've heard about is bipolar ionization. I have an issue with that because I've had a company that wanted to have them install bipolar ionization in my last district. They said, we will do whatever you want, but we asked for the company that provides the bipolar ionization. They wanted independent testing. They went out and they did the testing and never came back with the results, so they think that it didn't work. So that's my problem with that. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors out there right now. People are trying to sell things all the time. I did buy air filtration for a section of our buildings that had just unit ventilators in the classroom, wasn't providing enough air. It's a little filter that a fan blows and sucks air through it and puts the UV light to that, and that kind of disinfects the classroom. There's a lot of things out there that you can purchase if there's an area that we're having a concern with, but yes, I am looking into it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
I would like to ask one more thing of the board.
Sure.
I'm realizing here, I've been here 6 weeks now, I've got a lot of projects coming up, and I was wondering if there's any way that you guys could consider allowing me to acquire an additional leadership position in the facilities department. He would be in charge of the grounds and the maintenance staff. We do have the facility supervisor who's taking care of the majority of the custodians at this time. But I'd like this to be a working position so I could actually get him out there mowing with the guys and working with the maintenance staff in the building. We have the HVAC guy that's on our staff is pretty much run ragged right now. I'm on him. He's going around doing filter changes and belts every 3 months, so they're on quarterly rotations. He's doing repairs at the other buildings. And then I have the electrician who's doing nothing but lights right now, so that leaves one maintenance guy to do. We have over 160 open work orders right now, and we're drowning right now. We're trying to get it done. I'd like to get this guy in here, and he can work on the grass when we need it, and he can work inside when we need him. And he'd be also a leadership position and lead that stuff. I'm sorry? Him or her, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Jill.
Would this be equal to facility supervisor?
Yes, he would be his equal,
It would be his equal.
but working in a separate area.
And how many people would he or she have under her?
They would have 6 people working for him at this point.
Okay. So this one would only have 6 people working for him, while the rest supervisors got.
And that's why he'd be a working position. He wouldn't just be in an office and managing stuff. He'd be actually participating in the work that needs to be addressed.
So is the board willing to entertain that? If that's the case, then we would need to ask Maria to look in the budget to see where we could fund that line and add that line into the current operating budget so it would move forward. We could make the motion now. But I think really what we need to do today is just say that we're willing to move forward with that position, and then at the next meeting, ask Maria to come with an approximate amount with benefits and see where that's going to fit into the budget. Sean and Brian.
Is, Carl, the 150 work orders, do you think that might be, a larger volume, number right now because it's the beginning of the year and this is where everybody finds everything that's out of place and, that's going to settle down to be a little bit more reasonable? And what I don't want to see us is create a position that is to handle a temporary acceleration of our normal everyday averaging needs over time.
I can say that when I got here, we had 168 open work orders, but we've reduced, we've taken Stephen off the lighting project for a little bit to help out with other things. And, but the grass is always growing. We are so far, I increased the amount of mowings done on the fields first of all. They were not at game height when I got here, and we've cut them down to game height. And we have 9 buildings that need to be lawns manicured around them. There's so much we can do outside that isn't being done. If you would go over to any of the schools other than this school, because I've had them already take the weeds down off the fences, but there's one of the schools, the backstop to one of the baseball fields has, it's half covered, the entire thing, all the way to the top, with weeds, and it's just gonna rip the fences down if we don't start taking care of that. We got a lot to do outside, we got a lot to do inside, and even if we didn't have work orders, we have a lot to do on these buildings that we could be doing more with.
I can't anticipate if we have somebody that they're not going to find something to do. I mean,
Believe me, I
the
will
work orders
find-
are going to continue to come in.
Can't do that if they're constantly trying to get work orders done.
Right. So I'm agreeable to have it.
I just wanted to let the board know that Mr. Fournier, as part of his consulting, helped us survey school districts around the state who were similar size as ours, to look at the square footage, look at the staffing levels, and those sorts of things. So we have much of that data available. And I know, Carl, you have significant experience in your various backgrounds. So I think one of the things as a part of that next step is to look at what's the feasibility of staffing up as opposed to continuing to contract out. And that sort of cost benefit analysis. And I think, Carl, Maria, and I would probably be involved in that work. And it would be one probably somewhere half a year to a year to try and get some comparisons and costs and look at potential positions if the data showed that in fact we would get better service and potentially save money internally, then would we be looking at our staffing levels? I think it's something we need to look at, given the back.
Right, that's a long term to try to alleviate.
Right.
We do still contract some of our facilities maintenance work out. So we do, I don't think, as you say, probably in the next 6 months to a year, we should be relooking at the entire facility staffing to see what makes sense.
And I had
Maybe
plans to do,
add,
so.
instead of contract things out. That's what we're saying is, there's contracted stuff that we might want to pull in-house, it might be cheaper, but might not, but it's a little ways down the road. So it's a consensus of the board that we would be willing to entertain another position in facilities, should our CFO find the funds and propose a transfer. Okay, we're not taking a vote, no, we're just, this will move it forward, so the next time there will be an action item for this position with salary and benefits and where that money's gonna come from for line item transfer.
And I assure you, I have a whole grounds plan that I plan on bringing to you at some point, but unfortunately, I've been so focused on the facilities, trying to get them up to where they need to be and get ready for these, for the contracts that I got coming up. So, I will be getting to that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
For all your hard work. So, moving on, the next item in the agenda package is the budget development update. This is just, there is for the public, and I think this has been posted, if it has not, it needs to be. There's a tour of the high school and middle school next week, 9/9. It will be a joint tour with the budget committee and any members of the school board who wish to attend. Where is that starting at that? Where's that tour starting?
Hi, everybody. It is starting in the main entrance of the high school. We're starting at 7 o'clock, and I will encourage you all of you that can come. I will really appreciate that you can come and join us to see actually our facilities and what is it that we're working on and that we need to work on. So it will mean a lot.
Okay, great. And then Maria's kind of laid out the budget committee schedule. As I said at the last meeting, we're hopeful to have a joint meeting of the budget committee and the school board at some point. I think I sent back a date that I thought might be good. And I did request, I think it was either our November 4th meeting or I think it was our
Just towards the end of November, the second week, the second meeting in November, either the budget committee or the school board meeting.
Yeah, I'd actually prefer the school board meeting since I don't want to add another meeting to the school board member meetings, just because the public may be unaware, but there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 union negotiations going on that school board members are involved in, which means multiple meetings outside. So if we could have that meeting on a night of a school board meeting, it would definitely be appreciated.
Yeah, I'm sure we can work that out with the.
So we're looking at
The last
the 28th.
budget meeting, was that posted? Where was that posted? Because I did not see that in the school calendar.
It was posted, it was actually me, Kathy Belcher used to post them, so I was the one who posted. It was posted under the budget committee documents. So I know now that I have to post it, and again, Kathy Belcher did all this, so I was not aware that I had to post it
It has
in
to
both
be in two
places.
places,
Mhm.
and usually the calendar is one of them. So I'm not sure that was a legal meeting.
It is, we actually look at the RSA today with Todd. It is because it was posted in two places, it was actually posted in 3 places. It was at the schools, it was at the SAU, and it was posted in our website, in the budget committee site of our website.
Okay, I don't think I've even been in there.
It's just in our website, if you hit budget committee documents, that's where it was.
Okay.
And it was at the SAU, both bulletin boards in the SAU and at school, so.
But the next ones will be in the calendar that's on the website, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Ken Henderson was putting it today there, and it is also in the budget committee website, and it will be posted in the schools as well.
Thank you, Maria.
Well, it's already sent to the schools, so.
Okay.
Marie here, if I could just get some latitude, I'd like to ask a question. I don't know if everybody's aware of what transpired in Peterborough with regards to some financial matters over there. And it had to do where there was an intersection of an email going between the school district and the regional school district that supports that. I was just wondering, what developed out of that, what kind of procedures, and I'm not looking for an answer right now, but to look up that what particular happened, and then what do we have in our processes and policies to prevent something like that happening to Timberland? So that's what I wanted to just.
I'm sorry, what?
I'm not sure that I.
There was an interception of, it's basically fraud that got brought in where, the Secret Service is involved in this, is that an email was intercepted between the town of Peterborough and the regional school district that supports that particular area. And they have been, I don't recall the exact amounts, but it was multiple millions of dollars that was paid. And the Secret Service was able to track it as far as the articles were going, is that they were able to track it, follow it to a particular point where it was converted into cryptocurrencies, and then of course it's at that point, I don't know if they can trace it or what, but it's basically, they're missing several millions of dollars in the end, and it was due to fraud. And what I want to just try to understand is what procedures and policies do we have, and to look at that and maybe enhance them, expand upon them, so that we don't have to look at the voters and tell them that we just lost multiple millions of dollars. Because I don't think anybody on this table or in our office would ever want to have to tell that story.
If you'd like to have that discussion, as Kristen's pointing out to me, it should be a non-public discussion.
It was just more of what are the procedures, not like what we do. That I understand we can talk about non-public. I just wanted to put it like on a future agenda, so this would be the introduction, so that Maria could put something together and present something to the board. Just put, at least my assurance is that we have proper procedures in place to handle such a problem.
Yeah, I can put something together regarding the financial side, how do we handle the banking for us, but I think that's more IT. I don't.
No, it's, I'll forward it off to the board and to you the whole article.
Sure.
Brian's just commented on it, so you're aware of the issue. And it's just to look at ourselves as somebody else had an issue, which is terrible on its own merits. I want to look at our organization and figure out, hey, we have the proper procedures in place such that something like that, if it were to happen here, it wouldn't result in the same outcome that
Sure.
Peterborough had.
Yeah,
That's
if
the
you
whole
can share the
point.
information or send me a request, I can definitely look at it.
So Sean, that's basically purchasing and procurement procedures and checks and balances?
checks and balances. It was more of the wiring transfers is how they were doing it, because they were sending it, and an email got intercepted in there, they changed some stuff around, requested accounts, and what happened is the staff at the respective one looked like, oh, this is coming from the other entity, oh yeah, we'll change it and move something to a different account, and something like that, based entirely off of an email, that's what the problem was, and that's what's festered the problem. And the outcome, as I've alluded to, is catastrophic. That's the kind of stuff that we have to place in place. Like if you try to do a wire transfer now from bank to bank, they're actually making sure that you actually go physically to the bank and do it. You couldn't, where previously you could do that differently. I don't know if it's threshold amounts, but these are the kind of procedures that banks have put in place to do that.
And there's different types of audits. The audits are typically done in the school boards annually. You get a result that typically says, you know, the procedures are moving forward, but that's very different from a forensic audit that looks for malfeasance.
Yeah, but this is an entity that's outside of us.
No, I understand.
Or in this case, at that point, you don't want to find it in an audit because they're already.
I mean, it's really a loss mitigation strategy.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
Sheila, did you have a question? Yeah, okay. The next item on the agenda is the food service contract. As you may or may not be aware, the government is now offering free meals to all students for this year. This has kind of caused an issue with our food service provider because they now have to make more lunches, which means they need more laborers. On the positive side, though, we're going to be getting more revenue. So we did sign a contract with them in March. They're now looking for us to, they've proposed an adjustment to their contract, and they're looking for us to approve this. If you look at the second page here, it's a net gain for us in terms of, it's a $142,000 variance to the positive side. So I'll open the floor to questions unless, Marie, you want to present anything on this, or no. Sheila and Barbara?
The biggest question I have is this new employee is a Whitson employee, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Barbara?
And what is the length of the contract?
It's 1 year, it's until June 30th. So when you guys, when we signed the contract in March, we did not know that we were going to serve free lunches, so it was just under the regular lunch program. And now that we're serving free lunches, the government actually is providing new rates for reimbursement, and they are significantly larger than the rates last year. So that's why
You did a really good job laying it out on one page and making it understandable and showing that the grant more than covers the increase.
Okay.
Thank you.
No, you're welcome.
Okay.
I'll make a motion. Anybody else? Okay. Want to make a motion to accept the food service contract update that Maria has proposed with Whitson's for year 2022, 21-22. That's it.
Okay, is there a second? Kelly seconds, all in favor?
I'm laughing because Maria's going.
7-0, oh wait, 8-0, 8-0 now. Okay.
Maria, I got you.
Next item on the agenda is committee membership. I do apologize, name spelled wrong here. Kelly has resigned from the board effective after this meeting. I was thankful that she attended this meeting. I don't like to leave towns non-represented due to work issues. So we, Kristen and Barbara will be picking the replacement for RSA in terms of that. But following Kelly's resignation, we now have 2 seats available. There's one on curriculum and assessment, one on wellness. Amy, is curriculum meeting on Tuesday? We need a second board member if they are.
We are meeting not this coming Tuesday, but the following Tuesday.
So we need a board member to sit in the following Tuesday, which would be the 14th?
Yeah.
The 14th at 4 o'clock?
I believe it's 4 o'clock, right? Yeah.
Are there any takers? Do it, it's really good. This doesn't mean you'd be permanently on the curriculum committee, just until we have a replacement, and then we will ask them to be on the curriculum committee.
Well, is there any chance that we'll have a replacement next week?
I mean, it's possible, but then I don't really know if they're gonna be able to sit on the curriculum, depends on their.
Well, curriculum is the,
I'll stand by and go if we don't have somebody by then.
You'll be available on the 14th at 4?
Check, I will be able to do that.
So we have a second person?
Check my work calendar.
Okay.
Yeah, I can do it.
I do not believe we've had scheduled meetings. I have not yet met with them.
Can we find that out?
For wellness?
Wellness is.
It's usually once a quarter, and was Susan Rassico that chaired?
Yeah.
And she's gone, there is nobody in charge of it anymore.
Brian, we need to get that committee back up and running now that school's back in session. The
they've all
wellness
been
committee.
assigned.
Hmm?
They've all been assigned, and Michelle's working on the meeting schedule.
Okay, so that meeting will get back up and running.
All the internal, I'm not sure if we've completed the board representation, but all the other committee representations from administrative and so on are in place.
Well, all the board representation for the committees
Would have been done before.
is done.
Yes, I believe we've done the overlay.
Yeah, so we just need to get that committee up and running, so.
I know Michelle is working on all of the meeting invites now.
Okay, great. All right, now,
If we need someone, you know the schedule, just let them know. I'll try to do it.
yeah, I can try to do it.
So,
Okay.
either way, I mean, so.
All right. Administrator's report, Dr. Cochran, do you have anything?
There was a question about lunches and an update on cafeteria. And the update that we have is that all schools can accommodate students in their respective cafeterias at 3 feet social distancing. All tables of various shapes and sizes are clearly labeled with a set number of students able to be seated. Students are able to remove their masks to eat once seated and put the mask back on when getting up. And we're utilizing outdoor spaces when necessary and when able to, weather permitting. And there are 3 overflow rooms available at the high school for students to eat in. I wouldn't be surprised if that has caused a few rescheduling issues that had to be looked at, but so far so good. But that was the update I believe that was requested.
Thank you. Moving on to the personnel report. We have a nomination for Lindsay Staranko, .5 pre-K teacher from Danville. Is there a motion to accept that nomination? Sean makes a motion, Sheila seconds, all in favor? 7-0. Brian's not here, so 7-0. We have, and 7, Brian just walked out, so we're down to 7. Steve's not here. And then we have a resignation, Karen Lovering, special educator in Danville.
Make a motion to accept Karen Lovering's resignation.
Is there a second? Sean seconds. All in favor? 7-0.
Can I just ask for an update on the positions that were put in the budget last meeting? Have those folks been hired?
Sure. I'll start and give you the immediate response, and then we'll kick it over to Chris, or, okay. The motion was made and passed at Thursday night. By Monday, we had identified candidates, done first and second round interviews, and then moved forward with contract offers to all 3, is my understanding. One of which signed with us, and the other 2 took positions in other districts because salary was higher. So within a 48 working hour turnaround, we had 3 offers out. I've not had the most recent update, so if somebody wants to pick me up on that, but I have to say, given everything that was going on, for them to turn that around and get that done in that amount of time was unreal. So
We're looking for additional candidates at this point and going back to advertising out again. We have, to your suggestion of, did we give consideration to some current employees and reallocating positions, and really it was thought that where folks are currently is where they're needed. When you start to, as you know, move unified arts and things like that, it sort of creates a domino effect of probably creating more problems. It solves one problem, creates another one. And I know that wasn't, your point was looking at folks who were familiar with the students, if we were going to be starting the new classrooms, right out of the gate for the first day of school. And so, since that ship has sailed, it's been thought that now, at this point, it's better to be considering new staff.
So do we have classrooms right now with 26 kids in them?
So 25 is the highest.
So we currently have classrooms that have been set up with 25 in them, that we are potentially going to disassemble and reassemble into new classrooms when we find people to hire?
Yes, and it would not be the first time that that happens. It often happens in districts even into October when funding comes in and districts can hire additional staff. Again, to Mr. Cullen's point, we need to expand our search. We had candidates and we've exhausted our pools at this point, so we need to expand our search, and we are very hopeful that we will find 2 candidates to take those positions. At that point, we would consider redistributing the students in order to make 4 smaller classes.
Have you notified parents that this is your plan?
It is my understanding that both schools have explained to parents through both open house and in their messaging that this is what they're doing moving forward.
That is true.
Okay. Okay, and what do you mean by expand your search?
Look for more candidates. The pools were exhausted as far as the pool of candidates that we had from the past advertisements, so we need to look at advertising elsewhere. We're also looking at reaching out to creating some partnerships with some universities, but reaching out to them directly as well to say, do you have somebody who's going to graduate in the very near future, or somebody who might be eligible for certification through another avenue.
We knew a year and a half ago from national statistics that we're short of about 250,000 teachers. And this, for the previous school year, the Department of Education actually passed a regulation that allows us to hire as teachers uncertified individuals who met certain criteria. So not only at the national level, but at the local level, it's an issue. And, even the quick job that folks did to turn things around for those 3 hires, we saw that, they were able to take other positions because of salary differential. So, it is tight, and we were fortunate those places where we lost people. I think we were able to attract and bring in some very high quality candidates, but this is an ongoing issue that's only going to be exacerbated moving forward.
I appreciate all of those pressures, but my concern remains that these classrooms are large and that this puts teachers and students in a position that is not what's best for them. I'm just going to reiterate again that I think that, the pool is very shallow. Expanding your search is not necessarily going to turn up what you're looking for. I would hate for students to have to be moved or shifted classrooms in late October or November after they've established classroom communities and relationships with their teachers. I'm going to advocate again that you think about reallocating folks that you have in the buildings to fill this need at this time.
Could we put this on the agenda for the next meeting, please, to look at this, see where we stand, and look at the possibility of reallocating should that become necessary? Thank you, Amy. All right, And moving on, committee reports or reports of the school board. Are there any committees? Barbara, no. Amy, no. I guess because we're just at the start of the school year. As I said, the CIP committee will be meeting next week. We have had a meeting, Brian and I, just to try to bring new people up on board. There are ongoing union negotiations with TTA and the other 4 bargaining units, custodial, secretary, maintenance, administrators, food service. So those are ongoing. Okay.
Just quickly, I just want to thank Kelly for the time that she did serve on the board.
Yes.
I appreciate it. I'm very sorry to see you go, and I wish you could stick around, but Foster's going to miss you, so, and we're all going to miss you, so thank you. You've been a valuable member.
It's been a pleasure serving all of you and working with all of you, and I'm sad that it's not working out, but hopefully in the future I can run again.
Thank you. And we will be looking to go into a non-public session, but before we do that, I was remiss, I did not at the beginning of a meeting make note of the loss of 13 of our soldiers and Marines in Afghanistan over the last week. One of those was relatively local in Lawrence, Mass, from Lawrence, Mass, a Marine sergeant. So I'd like to just take a moment of silence to remember those soldiers and their families. Thank you. Thank you, and we wish them well. We now need to go into a non-public session under 91A:3, paragraph 2, section C. Looking for a motion. Go. Sheila makes a motion. Kristen seconds. Kat, could you take a roll call, please?
Mr. Boyle's not here. Dr. Farah?
Yes.
Ms. Gentile? Yes. Mrs. Kishka?
Yes.
Ms. Lowe's? Yes. Mr. O'Neill? Yes. Mrs. Savage?
Yes. Okay, so we will do that. We won't need to come into a public for that.
We should not.
We should not, we should not need to return to public session after this. Thank you. Thank you, all the administrators.